About an hour after arriving at Fort Union, Billy found his best friend, Johnny. He had been waiting at the port for some time now. Well, the two friends, they hugged each other so much, slapped each other on the back. Well, best friends forever, you know? They had grown up together. What would it be like to serve in the same army group? Wow, it would be so much fun. They were coming back to the barracks, and to the town where they were stationed when Billy felt something was odd. Johnny was a good guy. I mean, he was, kind of elevated and cheerful, but he was way too cheerful now. And he kept talking about some Celia. Ooh. When Billy heard this, he knew that his friend Johnny had it. He had it real bad. Kept talking about Celia's beauty and her traits and how perfect she was. I mean, Billy was a good man, trying new. Thought, well, what could happen? Well, I'm happy. I'm happy for Johnny. He found somebody, and apparently she, kind of, she answers back. But when Billy actually met Celia, he said, "Oh man, what a flirt," because that's what she was. But Johnny was so much in love. He couldn't bear to see anything else but her perfections. When Celia, walked out with him and they spent some evenings together, well, Johnny went back to Billy on cloud 9. But when she started to flirt with the other officers who were obviously infatuated with her, he went jealous and desperate and wallowed in self-pity. I mean, Billy tried to tell him to stop doing this, to, find somebody else, find somebody nicer. But no, Johnny had it bad. And they were passing on a couple of months of this wooing, this courtship, and Billy saw that it was getting worse and worse and worse. And Johnny was, getting into a little bit more aggressiveness with the other officers who also wanted to win Celia's heart. But to no avail did Billy do anything. He couldn't do anything. Johnny was just way off. And so happens that one night there was a dance, and Johnny was preparing himself to ask her to dance. But before that, maybe he could be her date. And when he asked her, she said yes. Well, Johnny was absolutely overjoyed. She dressed very, very provocatively, very seductively, grabbed Johnny's arm, and Johnny, with a big grin on his face, led her to the dance. And Billy was there, and halfway through this party, there was a big thump on the door. And in came another officer panting. An Apache raid. Johnny was captain of the battalion, of the platoon, and he was in charge. And Billy was also there. He was in his team, and it was his charge that he had to go and find out these people and stop this raid. And Celia was crying desperately, creating such a scene, asking him not to go, to please not to go, that he shouldn't leave her alone. And that was when Johnny fell for it completely. He knelt down and asked Celia to marry him. And Celia, with tears in her eyes, said yes. And it was so hypocritical. Billy saw it so through. She promised Johnny that she would wait for him, and if he never came back, she would never marry another person. Johnny swallowed it whole. But he went out along with Billy. They set out into the forest, but it was too big, so they decided to cut up into two teams. Johnny, the head of one, and Billy on the other. They decided to meet again before dawn, and if the other didn't come back, they would have a search party ready. So that's what they did. Billy went up through the mountains and found a few of the Apaches. There was a big battle, and there was one victor, Billy's team. They went back to the rendezvous point, but at dawn, Johnny didn't come back. Only a few of his soldiers said that they were ambushed and they had taken Johnny somewhere. Billy was crushed. He was his best friend. But he couldn't do anything. They tried to do a search party, and for 2 days, they searched up and down through the forest, but they never found Johnny's body. On the third day, they went back to the town. Billy went up to Celia. They were obviously engaged, and broke the news to her. And her, putting up such a terrible act, cried onto the shoulders of Billy, saying, "Oh, my only love." Billy didn't believe one word. She moaned and she moaned for 5 days. And then after a week, her mourning was over. And she started her flirtatious act. She started to smile and engage with the other officers who were also trying to court her. It was a couple months afterwards that a new captain came in. Wow, and what a captain. The type that Celia was extremely interested in. The captain also found her very attractive, and they started to court. And just 2 weeks later, they were engaged. Billy was still stationed there and saw the whole thing and thought of his best friend. What would he have done? What would have happened? The wedding was set for a month. Everything was prepared, perfect, just for Celia. And this captain was a man with money to stand up for Celia's demands. On the wedding day, everybody was invited. And after the ceremony, when the bride and groom went into the dance floor, darkness came over. A wind started to pick up. And it got so strong that suddenly the door burst open The candles were off. They were blue. They were blown. And in came a wail and a moan so terrible that everybody was struck solid. Nobody could move. And in came the thumps of a man slowly walking, but not a man, a festering body with a hatchet in his head, no scalp, and the uniform of an officer from Fort Union. Billy recognized Johnny coming in slowly, directly going to Celia. Billy tried to see into his friend's eyes. There were no eyes. They were just sockets with burning flames in them. The stench was overpowering. Johnny grabbed fast of Celia, turned his head and looked at the musicians, and they started a demonic, evil waltz. Such horrible music. And Johnny started to dance with Celia, and she couldn't say a word. She was so scared. She was so stunned. And everybody else was speechless. Around and around, Johnny danced this death waltz with Celia. And with every step, the bride got paler and paler. And Johnny grabbed fast and tighter until finally Celia gasped and fell dead on the floor. Johnny knelt down and started to cry and shake her, to mumble things that nobody could possibly imagine. Until finally, he got up, turned around, had a sad face that looked at Billy, and then slowly walked out the door and vanished into the mist. The groom went running to see his bride, shook her, moaned, wailed, screamed at her, but there was nothing to be done. Slowly, he picked her up and carried her out. 2 days later, they buried Celia, but Billy could not sleep. So he asked his captain for one final search of Johnny's body. After seeing everything that had happened, his captain agreed. And for 48 hours, they kept searching and searching until finally, in a crevice, they found Johnny's body. Exactly as it was during the wedding night. festering meat, a hatchet through his head, no scalp, the uniform of Fort Union. Johnny grabbed his friend and brought him back. We buried him in the village graveyard, and beside him, Celia. A few days later, Billy picked up his things and left. He couldn't possibly stay there. And he vowed he would never come back. But sometimes news would come, news of Fort Union. They say that Celia's ghost still wanders around, kneels down on the grave of Johnny. And I can tell you that that's true. But that zone is not only of Apaches. No, no, no. There was another tale that a friend told me about the Cherokee who lived near that zone. I mean, a little bit farther away, but they had problems of their own. You see, because in that zone, the Cherokee lived peacefully in their village. Unfortunately, two creatures appeared. Spearfinger, the wife, was a terrible creature. And Spearfinger, well, that was a good name. Because sometimes her finger would create a spear, and she just loved eating the liver of young children, and she was a shapeshifter. She would sometimes go to the villages, and for example, if a child had run and fallen and bruised his or her knee, Spearfinger would take the shape of his or her mother, beckoned the child to come. And while she was tending and softly cuddling the child, she would slit the side and pull out the liver, put it in a basket, and then close it up. The child didn't feel anything. And she would go back to her house or to his house. And only a few days later did the parents know that Spearfinger was around, because the child suddenly got sick and a few days later died. You would have to be careful. You wouldn't be able to let your children run around, because perhaps also Spearfinger would go out, and if a child was lost, she would act as the maid or somebody close, beckoned the little kid to come, give them a sweet hug, and at the same time her finger would shift shape, cut the side, take out the liver, and put it in a basket. And he would close that side and the child wouldn't feel a thing. Until a couple days later also, he died. The Cherokee got really scared. But that wasn't the only problem, because Spearfinger had a husband, Stone Skin. They were both Stone Skin, but he was trickier. And he liked a challenge. Stone Skin would go up against those hunters, the ones that would run as fast as deer. And when they tried to get away from Stoneskin, he would use a walking stick that he had, and he would put it at the top of a hill. And when that hunter, that running person, would go down, down, down to go away and up another hill, Stoneskin would let his stick grow, 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 grow. And from top to top, he would walk until finally the hunter, exhausted, fell down. And that's when Stoneskin would eat on his flesh. Many men died because of this. And the Cherokee people wanted to get rid of this problem, so they finally had a council. And they agreed that they would lay a trap for both Spearfinger and Stoneskin. They would round up as many children as they could and put them in one spot. They would dig a hole and make a trap so that both creatures would fall in. And they decided to do a relay race with the hunters so that we would use the same skin and then lead them to where the children were. So they took days to prepare themselves. They used the same skin so that they would be able to confuse Stoneskin, thinking that it was the same hunter. The day finally came. Parents were extremely nervous as to what would happen to their children, but they gathered them up. They put them in the center of the village and hid. Before them was a big hole that they dug, and they placed branches over it. The hunters got ready. They placed themselves strategically until finally the time came. Wind picked up the scent of the children, and it flew all the way to where Stoneskin and Spearfinger were. Smelled Stoneskin. Hunters, children. How many livers can I get? Stoneskin came out and started to search for that hunter. And out it came, running as fast as deer, up a hill and another, and Stoneskin started to give chase. He got to the top of the hill and he saw how the hunter was running down. He put his stick on the ground and it started to grow all the way out to the second hilltop. And he started to walk leisurely. At the bottom of the hill, the hunter hid, and then another one came out and started running up the hill and down the hill. Stoneskin barely got there when he saw that the hunter was running. He placed his stick and put it on the next hilltop and started to walk. And hill after hill until finally they reached the village. And then finally, the third and last hunter fell down in front of the children as if exhausted. Spearfinger was there also, with the scent of the children nearby. How could she not possibly get this opportunity? And Stoneskin was there, and they both charged towards their objective, and then boom, they fell into that whole. Hunters and warriors started throwing arrows and spears at them, but they couldn't do anything. They just laughed. Their skin was so strong. It was stone skin. Until finally, desperate, they didn't know what to do. The stone skin and spear finger tried to get up, but their bodies were so heavy. If they changed from their stone skin into something else, if they morphed, their flesh would be as easily damaged as anybody else's. They couldn't do that. But they were desperate to cut out. Until finally a woman grabbed a big stone and threw it. It hit Spearfinger and it chipped a little bit of her. Seeing that it could happen, all the villagers started to throw stones at them, and they were chipping off bit by bit. It hurt terribly, and they screamed, and they said things so terrible that they couldn't be possibly said, but they did say something that we're going to eat you alive, they said. We're going to feed on your blood. But the villagers didn't stop. They kept screaming, we're going to feed on your blood, we're going to feed on your blood. And they kept throwing stones until finally there was only rubble. The villagers looked at each other, ecstatic. They finally made it. They finally got rid of Stone Skin and Spearfinger. Everybody cheered. Everybody laughed. Everybody hugged each other. Parents went to their children, embracing them. But they heard something in the back. A little Z noise. As if millions and millions and millions of wings came out from that place where those two creatures were. And a huge black cloud of tiny, tiny little blood-sucking creatures came out and started to chew on them and to pick on them. Stone Skin and Spearfinger told them that they would feed off their blood. And to this day, they still do. Because that is how mosquitoes came to be.